From the dawn of time we came, moving silently among you, down through the centuries. Immortals. I'm Connor Macleod of the Clan Macleod, the Highlander. After the death of my friend Ramirez, and my beloved wife Heather, I left my home in the Highlands of Scotland and began to wander the world searching for answers.
Great danger lies ahead, Highlander. From a faraway land comes another, the most feared and evil among us. He keeps growing stronger every day, feeding on the power of other immortals. Soon, there will be none left who can stop him. If he wins, the world will suffer eternal damnation.
Who is he?
His name is Cain.
You don't let people in, do you?
I can't.
In December of 1994, Highlander 3 arrived on the big screen and made its way to the USA in January of 1995. The film has many different titles. In magazines such as Starlog, it was called Highlander 3 The Final Conflict, and retained that title in parts of Europe. The UK and Japanese releases were given the title The Sorcerer, and for the USA it was retitled again to The Final Dimension, which doesn't really make sense. The Final Conflict or The Sorcerer titles make the film's plot a little clearer to its audience. Shot in early January of 1994 and they finished principal photography in late February, it was produced on a budget of $26 million and only made back about $36 million worldwide, so overall it proved to be a financial failure. With critics and fans complaining that it was a carbon copy of the original, and with Highlander 2 being such a mess, I think many were turned off by the idea of a third film. In efforts to save money, they shot most of the film in Canada and did additional scenes in Morocco and Scotland. There may be one or two shots done in New York, but there are obvious continuity errors with these. For example, when Macleod walks down the streets of New York, the streets are clean, but as he makes his way home he is suddenly surrounded by thick snow, so this shot must have been done in a different location. Also in the airport scene, Connor goes to meet his son. It's supposed to be in New York, but many have spotted the sign saying "Welcome to Montreal," but I personally didn't see it. Maybe it's out of focus in the background, but when Connor chases after Cain you can see a sign saying "Welcome to Newark." Christopher Lambert took a lot of persuading to return for a sequel. He was disappointed by Highlander 2 and its production problems, so he made it clear he wanted more control over the third film creatively. He brought on director Andrew Morrison, well known for his music videos for Michael Jackson, Elton John, Guns N' Roses and the Pet Shop Boys. In 2011 he won an award for his contribution to the music industry, so at the time he seemed the ideal candidate to take on Highlander and follow in the footsteps of Russell Mulcahy, who was also an expert in music video direction. Christopher Lambert had just made the film Gunman, which co-starred Mario von Peebles. Chris had a great time working with Mario, and he felt it would be great for him to play the villain Cain, so he persuaded the producers to bring him on board. The film only has a small cast of characters and really focuses around Connor, Dr. Alexandra and Cain. Christopher Lambert returns again to play Connor Macleod. Since Highlander he has gone on to do many action films such as the cult B-movie Fortress and carved out a very successful career. He also returned once to play Connor in the popular TV series of Highlander, making an appearance in the first episode called The Gathering. He meets up with his cousin Duncan Macleod, who is the protagonist of the show. He offers him some helpful advice and helps him battle the evil immortal by the name of Slain Quince. I don't think the third film at all links itself to the TV show. There may be the odd reference here and there for hardcore fans, but I personally didn't notice anything. However, in the fourth film there is a clear effort to link the show to the film series. Christopher has really bad eyesight. He suffers from an extreme form of short-sightedness. If you see him in interviews, he is always wearing his glasses. He can't wear contact lenses, so when it comes to acting, he is virtually blind. If you look closely, in many of the sword fights they use a double to avoid Christopher accidentally hurting his colleagues. The ever-reliable Mako plays the Sorcerer, Nakano. His role is very similar to his previous performance in Conan the Barbarian and its sequel. They introduce new abilities to the series. Nakano has the power of illusion, which he is hoping to pass on to Macleod. The talented Mario von Peebles plays the evil immortal Kane. He seeks the prize and wants the power of illusion from Cabal's old master, Nakano. Mario has starred in many movies over the years and has directed many films and TV shows. I'm sure many Jaws fans remember him from Jaws: The Revenge. Canadian actress Deborah Unger plays Dr. Alexandra Johnson and Sarah from Macleod's past. Deborah has starred in many successful movies from David Cronenberg's Crash, David Fincher's The Game, Payback with Mel Gibson, and the Silent Hill movies. The movie opens in the 16th century where Macleod has travelled to Japan to train with an immortal Japanese sorcerer, Nakano, who has gained a reputation for mastering the art of illusion. However, Macleod is not aware of another immortal called Kane, who is also interested in mastering this power. Kane makes his way across Asia with two other immortals. They attack nearby villages and massacre the people to gain Nakano's location. Kane reaches the cave and beheads Nakano, taking his powers, whilst Macleod just barely escapes. The quickening is brought on by the changes of power, but Kane and his men are trapped in the cave, preventing them from participating in the Gathering of 1985, which occurs in the first film. The movie jumps forward to 1994, and Dr. Alexandra Johnson and a fellow archaeologist are excavating a cave, unaware that Kane and his men are buried in there. Johnson is fascinated by the legend of Nakano and is out to prove it was based on fact. That night, a security guard hears a noise coming from the cave. He goes to investigate and is suddenly pulled through the wall. Kane and his men slowly emerge, and he already has his mind fixated on the Highlander to gain the prize. Connor is now living with his adopted son John in Marrakesh. It is revealed that his wife Brenda from the first film died in 1987 in a car crash. Connor still believes the Gathering is over with. Kane kills one of his men to gain more strength, causing Connor to sense something is wrong, so he leaves his son with his friend Jack and heads back to New York. However, on his return home he's mugged and left for dead. He is taken to hospital, but already his wounds have healed and he is chucked in a mental ward. One of Kane's henchmen, Kabul Khan, is close to locating Connor, although I'm not sure how he's got a plane ticket and a passport to get over to New York so fast. Connor, in his attempts to escape, does battle with the Immortal, taking his head, and the quickening begins. The police find the remains of the Immortal and relate it to the old case of 1985, believing Connor is involved. The officer in charge is John Sten. I first thought he was the original cop from the first film who disliked Macleod, but it's not a returning character. Connor returns to his old apartment and switches on the TV, only to see Dr. Alexandra on the news. He is shocked to see how much she resembles his lost love from the 18th century, Sarah Barrington, who he met while he was in France. Meanwhile, Kane has arrived in New York and his only goal is to seek out Connor and claim the prize. The film was extended by roughly 2 to 3 minutes for its home video releases, arriving on Laserdisc and later on DVD. There is hardly anything new to this cut, it's just the inclusion of a couple of extra shots and new visual effects. There is one moment of alternative dialogue where Kane knows he's been locked away for 400 years. You see Kane arrive in New York but using his new powers. See how much it actually resembles the same visual effects used in Time Cop when Van Damme travels back to the past. There are a couple of extra shots during the cheesy sex scene. There is a quick visual effects shot when Kane steals a guy's glasses, and they even reuse a shot from the first film in the final quickening sequence. A very cheap and obvious drop-in shot, but thankfully they included a new visual effect as well to show the prize has finally been won by Macleod. For the visual effects in Highlander 3, they do make use of computer-generated effects, especially for the morphing technique that Kane uses to fool Macleod to make his escape, or when he impersonates him at the airport. He doesn't really make great use of his powers, which lets the film down. They could create more interesting fight scenes if they did. The visual effects were supervised by Brian Johnson, who had worked on Alien, Empire Strikes Back, Dragon Slayer and Neverending Story. Brian has a great track record of producing incredible effects, but unfortunately in Highlander 3 they are very inconsistent. The CGI is very dated now, and I think looked very average at the time. There is a possibility that the production didn't really have the funds to hire a more skilled team to take on the CGI workload. But saying that, during the end battle when Kane has transformed himself into Alexandra, when he morphs back, the effect is executed to a decent level and looks genuinely creepy. The movie retains its solid special effects in the quickening sequences with heavy use of pyrotechnics. To be honest, they keep the effects down to a minimum to ground it in more reality, unlike Highlander 2 that used a lot of visual effects. The score to Highlander was composed by J. Peter Robinson. John is an English composer and worked as a keyboardist for many bands throughout the 70s and into the early 80s. He made a change in his career and moved into film composing in 1985, providing music for the US cut of Police Story. He also provided the scores to a few other Jackie Chan films, Rumble in the Bronx, First Strike and Mr. Nice Guy. He has been a very productive composer throughout his career, and his work on Highlander is probably the highlight of the movie for me. The series started out with an amazing score by Michael Kamen and the support of the band Queen. Highlander 2 provided totally different music by Stuart Copeland, and the same applies for the follow-up. They all have a unique sound and all work well individually. I still and will always prefer the original music, but what John Robinson does is provide an epic sound that complements Michael Kamen's score in style and fits nicely into the series. There are a couple of songs included as well I think that work better in this film than the ones attached to number 2, but nothing really compares to the quality of Queen. The soundtrack wasn't released as a complete album at the time, but in 1995 there are a number of tracks included in a Highlander soundtrack collection. I believe you can download it from iTunes, but I'm sure there are some bootlegs floating around the net which include more tracks from this film. The biggest problem with Highlander 3, and what many fans have highlighted, is that it just recycles the plot from the first film. Fundamentally, it feels like a remake. There are identical scenes and characters. Alexandra seeking and following Connor is the same as Brenda's role in the first film. Kane arrives in New York and sleeps with a prostitute, very much like the Kurgan in the original, but this time it does provide some funny moments, like when he doesn't know what a condom is and attempts to eat it. Kane kidnaps Macleod's kid and drives down a motorway, narrowly avoiding oncoming cars, and you just sit there thinking, I've seen all this before in the original. It's extremely lazy writing. I think a lot of the blame has to be put on William Panzer, the producer who unfortunately passed away in 2007. He produced all the films and wrote the story outlines for Highlander 2, 3 and Endgame. He doesn't have any other major writing credits in his career. He operated as a producer and he clearly didn't come up with any decent ideas for the series and just milked it for all it's worth. With Highlander 2 being such a colossal disaster for the fans and critics, they obviously had to make amends with a sequel that was a direct follow-up to the original. This is what they should have done in the first place, despite the original having an ending that you can't continue with a follow-up with, because Connor wins the prize, but with Hollywood that doesn't matter. If you can make more money, then a sequel will definitely happen. What I think the film does right is expand upon Connor's history, showing his life during the 18th century and his lost love. The film feels like a genuine sequel, with him returning to his old apartment in New York, the police hunting down Connor because of the beheading of the Immortal in the hospital, and Connor's eventual return to Scotland. The training montage and watching him build his sword is really well shot. The director shows his great eye for sweeping cinematic photography and shows his strength as a music video director. The whole scene is pretty much a music video, with the love song accompanying the visuals. The fight scenes are nicely staged and the final battle is enjoyable. However, apart from those few moments I like, and of course the score, everything is very forgettable and it's hard to be invested at all. When the film came out, I had presumed they had finished the Connor Macleod storyline, and I was surprised to see a new film. The TV show had been on for a while, focusing on his cousin Duncan, so I was a little baffled as to why they were focusing on Connor again. Also, there was a cartoon series that aired in 1994, which was set in the future, featuring a new Macleod and saw Ramirez returning. This bloody franchise makes no sense. Despite Mario von Peebles trying his best with the character Kane, the writing lets him down. He doesn't feel like a threat to Connor at all. You know Connor is going to win because he's the hero, but there's no sense of suspense or real danger thrust upon him, apart from having his sword broken. Mario Von Peebles, I think, does provide a really good performance and does his best with what he is given, but because the character doesn't really pose any real threat or interesting dialogue, his performance can somewhat be forgotten. You could see him as a weak copy of the Kurgan from the original, even providing a similar voice. But there are still many scenes that I find him enjoyable in. I always find Christopher Lambert a joy to watch. He always seems to have an interesting screen presence despite being in a lot of B-movie schlock. I don't think many regard him as a great actor, but that doesn't really bother me. I think his strengths lie in his ability to show his emotions. He can be sad and angry on screen, and it seems genuine, but he also does it with a wink in his eye. Deborah does okay with her character, but she does seem uninterested in the film, which I'm not surprised by. She does look a bit bored throughout. I thought some of the supporting characters' performances were very weak, especially the cop who was hunting down Macleod, but I believe it's the result of dodgy ADR. Some characters sound dubbed, their voices don't seem to suit the actor, and the dubbing lacks any real effort. On the whole, it's not a very good movie. It's certainly better than number 2, but that wasn't difficult, so this isn't really saying much. There are nuggets of good stuff in it. The visuals and photography are strong in many scenes. When Connor is in the mental ward and he meets another patient who thinks he's Napoleon, which provides some great laughs. The score is fantastic, and Lambert and Van Peebles do their best. However, it feels very much like a rushed production to make up for the problems of the second film, and just a quick cash grab on the series. Their efforts, however little or large, didn't pay off because it was poorly received. I don't think the fans of the franchise hate it, but are more disappointed with it. It doesn't really offer much new. It ties up Connor Macleod's story nicely at the end, but everything else is kind of redundant. As soon as they made a sequel to the original classic, continuity was thrown out the window, and they just made stuff up as they went along, and their new ideas were weak from the get-go. There has been talk of a remake for the last couple of years, which to be honest I'm all for. They can reinvent the franchise, hopefully doing something new with it, and have an ending that leaves it open for follow-ups if it proves successful. But with a remake, you know you won't have the fantastic music by Queen. But I think it's time for a change and refresh of the series instead of endless sequels that make things worse with the continuity and timeline of the original. Should you see Highlander 3? If you are a fan of the series, you probably have seen it already and found it disappointing, or you may have hated it. If you haven't had a chance to see it, or you've missed the entire series, I suggest you skip number 2 completely after the first film and go directly to this one. It makes no mention of the second movie, ignoring it completely, which is probably for the best and is quite funny in itself. Highlander 3 is completely forgettable though, cheap in many areas and lazily written, but for me it has some nice moments that make it bearable to watch. However good or bad you may think it is, it's the proper sequel to the highly underrated 1986 classic.
I'm back now, with a woman I love and a son I've taken as my own. I'm at peace. It's finally over.
Does the boy know you're not his real father?
Oh, yeah. He knew he was adopted before he could spell it.
I hope whatever's taking you is worth what you're leaving.
I hope so, too. But I don't have a choice.
Look, Mr. Nash, I don't mean to bother you, but you're my only link to this Connor Macleod.
Try the phone book. There's plenty of Macleods in New York.
Well, thanks, but I'm only looking for one.
It's funny, you know, I thought immortals couldn't have children. But it seems that while I'm the master of illusion, you are turning out to be the master of deception, Highlander. How did you do it? How did you convince all those lovely women of yours that they were the ones that couldn't bear children? You must have been very disappointed. All those nice years thinking you were the only one left. But you see, the prize was never yours. And now, it never will be. And hell,
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. You can find more retrospective reviews by clicking on these videos. If you want to watch my upcoming reviews early before they go live on YouTube, you can support me through Patreon. Don't forget the poster designed by my talented artist Peter Bruce, celebrating 100 retrospectives, is still available to purchase. We ship worldwide and postage is affordable.